Hello everyone, Lucas here, and I'm going to talk about my user story for the VAP project we worked on this term. So if you open the project documentation and user story 745, the login access. So the description of my user story reads, as any user, student, faculty member, PI, co-PI, or staff, after registered, I want to be able to sign into the website. Google OAuth 2 should perform the authentication so we don't have to deal with the passwords. Different users get different views of the web page, and other developers should have access to the logged in user information from anywhere in our app using an API call. So to better illustrate the user story, I have a sequence diagram here we can go over. So as you can see, the user will click a sign in button in the home view of the web page, which is a default view, and we'll ask to authenticate with the provider that we specify, in this case Google OAuth. It gets passed into a sign-in controller. The sign-in controller will look at it and will realize, oh, if you're asking me for a Google provider, then I know the specificities that I have to serve you. That will be passed to the back end and the Satellizer. And Satellizer will prep all the information and send it to Google. And Google will check for the authenticity of our app. Our app has to be registered with Google. If our app is authentic and it's a hit on their database, the request is authorized and they will reply to Satellizer, our backend. And Satellizer will send a pop-up, a Google pop-up for the home view. And the user will see this pop-up and will understand that email and password are requested. Once the user puts in the email and password in the home view, in the little pop-up window, that information gets passed back to Google, and Google verifies the user. Once the user is verified, we check for the user email in the database because the user has to be registered. And on a hit, if this user is registered, we return the user type because we have to know what type of user is the user. If it is a student, PI, co-PI, staff, or whatever, in order for us to serve the correct web page for this user. So what will happen is the token will be created at this point, and we'll pass the token back to the user, and we'll refresh the view. And at this point, as soon as we refresh the view, we change the page to the correct page according to the user. And that's how the user signs in, logs into our application. The way that the user signs out is a little more simple. Just clicks the sign out button on the home view, and then we'll make a request to log out. That calls another logout function and removes the token. Once the token is removed, the user's web page is refreshed, and the user's not signed in anymore, just gets the default view of the web page. So first thing, in order to do this user story, to accomplish this user story, was to register everything in the Google developers. So if we click on the hamburger button, we go to the API manager, we can check the credentials, and there it is. This is when I registered the app. It gave me a client ID and also like a secret key, and both of these, the client ID and the secret ID, are coded in our app. So whenever our app makes a request to Google, Google will understand that we are registered and we're authorized to request a Google pop-up window for the user to log in. If we go to Mingle real quick, we can take a look at the release tree, and the login was introduced in Sprint 4 if I'm not mistaken. And there it is, it's the login. Description is similar to the one in the project documentation. And if we go to the sprint board, it's already considered done. There's a few shortcomings that I still have to update in the backlog, but the application works. The user story works. So if we go to GitHub, the way that I figured it out after registering with Google, I found out this very nice repository. It's called Satellizer, and it takes care of all the login system for us. It's basically an API for communicating with different login systems, and one of the systems available is Google, as you can see it over here. You can log in with Facebook, with GitHub, with whatever, but we're just using the Google one. So I embedded this code into our application, and I refactored it to serve, better serve our app. and I added like some nice features for whatever we were doing. So if you take a look at our code, this is our GitHub now for the app that we developed. If you go to the index.html, which is the page that gets served to the user, what's happening here is we're using an Angular style. So if we're using Angular, what happens is we just have one web page all along, and the rest of the content gets injected into this web page dynamically. That's what we have here, Angular dynamic content. Code gets injected in between these two brackets, and we serve the user different pages. So what I created here was a function with a controller. This navbar controller has this function called, find it, get user type. And with the get user type, we can figure out what type of user is the person requesting the web page. And if the user is a student, then we'll serve this on the navbar. We'll serve this button, this option on the navbar. If the user is a faculty, we'll serve these on the navbar. Because different users, they have different capabilities and different features in the web page. And it's the same for like PI, it's code 3. And for staff, it's 4. So once the user is logged in, we can call this function to figure out what type of user is this user, so we can serve the page accordingly. Go back to the controller. This is the function, and I'm using $auth, which is part of the Satellizer repository, which I was explaining earlier. And with the get payload, we can ask the user for the token. We can ask the application for the token, sorry. And we can check the token for information. So if the token type is student, we return one code. If the token type is faculty, we return another number, and so on and so forth. It's pretty simple and straightforward. If you go to the author routes, this is where we create the token for the user. This was already part of the Satellizer repository, but I just buffed it up a little by creating this variable called passport. So whenever Google verifies and authenticates the user, I just save the user email and the picture in the token so that it's accessible to everyone. And then the user type, since the user is already registered, as soon as the user logs in and is authenticated by Google, the first thing I do is I get the user's email and I query that email in my database with my user database. And if the user is registered, I should get a return, which is going to be either student, faculty, PI, co-PI, or staff. And that information will be written in the token, and whoever calls the get payload function, which is this, can get any of these types, and these two. These are just for the expiration time of the token. As you can see here, is 14 days. And that's how my user story works. And